So in addition to all the physical evidence in this case, prosecutors will be working to present a motive to get a conviction. With the possibilities on that, 7's Mari Salazar is live in Cohasset this morning with those details. Mari.
Overwhelming, and so even though the news are heartbreaking, they're not a surprise. They were expected. Of course, there's always a hope that there must be some terrible misunderstanding.
We know that what everybody was thinking anyway, that unfortunately Anna is not coming back, but now the person who is responsible for it.
On January 1st, 2023, Anna Walsh, a 39-year-old mother of three, vanished from her home in Cohasset, Massachusetts. Her husband told police she had left early for work in Washington, D.C., but she never arrived. Within days, investigators uncovered something far darker than a missing person case. Hidden inside her husband Brian's computer were searches that read like a blueprint for murder: how long before a body starts to smell, and how to dispose of a 115-pound woman. From that moment, the mystery surrounding Anna's disappearance shifted into something chilling: a story of secrets, betrayal, and a crime that left more questions than answers. Anna Ljubičić was born in 1983 in Belgrade, the capital of what was then Yugoslavia. She grew up in a country marked by unrest, but those who knew her described her as driven and unshakably hopeful. She attended the 5th Belgrade Gymnasium, and later earned a degree in French language and literature from the University of Belgrade. By her early 20s, Anna had already set her sights on something bigger: an escape to the United States. In 2005, she emigrated, carrying little more than determination. She found work in hospitality, eventually landing positions at luxury hotels, including the Inn at Little Washington and the Wheatley Hotel in Massachusetts. It was during that time that she met Brian Walsh, the man who would later become her husband. By 2016, they were married, and in the years that followed, Anna gave birth to 3 sons. Friends described her as a woman who balanced her roles as mother and professional with relentless energy. She was warm, fiercely loyal, and endlessly ambitious. In February 2022, Anna reached a major milestone. She became a regional general manager at the real estate company Tishman Speyer, splitting her time between Washington, D.C., where she worked, and Cohasset, Massachusetts, where she lived with Brian and their children. Her colleagues saw her as a rising star in real estate, a woman on the brink of even greater success. But beneath the image of accomplishment, there were signs of strain. Balancing 2 homes, 3 young children, and a husband confined under house arrest for federal fraud charges was no easy task. Friends would later recall that Anna seemed constantly in motion, always working, always pushing forward. It made her accomplishments remarkable, but it also hinted at the pressures she carried quietly, pressures that no one imagined would end in tragedy. On the morning of January 1st, 2023, Anna Walsh was supposed to travel from her home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, to Washington, D.C., where she worked. According to her husband, Brian, she left early, before dawn, to catch a ride to the airport. But no Uber was ever ordered. No flight was ever boarded. No surveillance camera caught her leaving the house. For days, her absence went unnoticed. It wasn't Brian who first raised alarm, but Anna's employer. On January 4th, her company contacted police when she failed to show up for work. Only then did Brian make a separate report, claiming his wife was missing. When investigators entered the Walsh home, they were met with unsettling contradictions. Brian's account of Anna's departure didn't match the evidence. He claimed she had rushed out to meet work obligations, but her phone, credit cards, and belongings offered no signs of travel. Inside the house, small but disturbing details began to surface. A knife, later found to have traces of blood, was discovered in the basement. Other stains, faint but visible, were also detected. Police noted that nothing about the scene aligned with the idea of a woman leaving voluntarily. Outside the home, Brian's movements in the days after Anna's disappearance raised even more suspicion. Despite being on house arrest with an ankle monitor, he was granted limited leave for errands. Investigators learned that during those hours, Brian had visited multiple hardware and home improvement stores, purchasing items like cleaning supplies, tarps, and other tools that, in hindsight, carried a sinister weight. The home that once held a family of 5 now felt like a hollow stage. Toys scattered in the children's rooms, the ordinary rhythm of life suddenly broken. The deeper investigators looked, the clearer it became, Anna hadn't simply vanished. Something had happened inside that house, and every trace left behind pointed to violence. As suspicion grew, investigators turned their attention to the man closest to Anna, her husband, Brian Walsh. On the surface, Brian was a father of 3, living in an upscale Massachusetts suburb. But beneath that facade was a history of lies and fraud. In 2021, Brian pleaded guilty in federal court to selling counterfeit Andy Warhol paintings. It was not a minor scheme, it was a calculated art fraud that revealed how comfortable he was with deception. At the time of Anna's disappearance, he was awaiting sentencing and living under house arrest, wearing an ankle monitor. His world had already been closing in. Those who knew Brian described him as intelligent, but manipulative. His life was a balance of appearances and control, traits that prosecutors later argued made him capable of something far darker than financial crime. While Anna's career was ascending, splitting her time between Washington, D.C., and Boston, Brian's had collapsed. She was working long hours in real estate, rising through the ranks at Tishman Speyer, while he was confined, dependent, and under scrutiny from federal authorities. The imbalance between them was growing sharper. Anna was known for her independence, her constant movement, her determination to keep building a life. Brian, by contrast, was tethered by his past crimes, limited in freedom, and increasingly desperate. To investigators, the picture that emerged was not just of a husband worried about his missing wife, but of a man cornered by circumstance. Financial stress, legal pressure, and a collapsing marriage all converged. Prosecutors would later argue that Anna may have been planning for a future without him, a prospect that could have pushed Brian further into paranoia and control. Psychologically, it was a familiar pattern. A partner with power slipping away. A history of dishonesty turning into something more dangerous. Forensic experts often ask, what trauma shapes someone to commit violence? What small behaviors foreshadow what's to come? In Brian's case, the answers seemed embedded in a lifetime of manipulation and entitlement. By the time Anna disappeared, it no longer looked like a random tragedy. To investigators, it began to feel inevitable. As investigators pressed further, the case against Brian Walsh shifted from suspicion to certainty. The turning point came when they examined his digital footprint. In the early hours of January 1st, while Anna was last seen alive, Brian was making a series of online searches that revealed a disturbing state of mind. The list was staggering. Among the queries, how long before a body starts to smell? Can you be charged with murder without a body? How to clean blood from a wooden floor? And most chilling of all, how to dispose of a 115-pound woman? It was not the search history of a desperate man looking for his missing wife. It was the blueprint of a calculated crime. At the same time, investigators traced Brian's movements in the days following Anna's disappearance. Despite being on house arrest, he had secured limited time for errands. Surveillance footage placed him at multiple hardware stores, purchasing hundreds of dollars worth of cleaning supplies, tarps, and other items that prosecutors later described as tools of disposal. Trash bags recovered from transfer stations and dumpsters around Boston told the rest of the story. Inside were blood-stained rags, clothing, towels, and even a hacksaw. DNA testing linked those items directly back to Anna. The evidence painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. Brian Walsh had not only misled investigators, he had left a trail of digital and physical clues that transformed a missing person case into a homicide investigation. With the evidence laid bare, Brian Walsh was arrested and charged with murder. The illusion of a family man had collapsed, and the fallout was immediate. Anna and Brian's 3 young children, ages 2, 4, and 6, were placed in state custody. They had lost their mother in the most brutal way imaginable, and their father to a prison cell. Friends described the home in Cohasset as eerily silent, a once busy household now marked only by absence. In Washington, D.C., Anna's colleagues at Tishman Speyer mourned the loss of a woman they described as bright, hardworking, and full of promise. Her disappearance left shockwaves across both communities she called home. For those who had known Anna in Serbia, her death felt especially cruel. She had left behind a difficult past in search of safety and opportunity, only to be betrayed by the person she trusted most. The story was no longer just about one crime. It was about 3 children left without parents, and a community left with the question of how such darkness could exist behind the closed doors of a quiet suburban home. Even with Brian Walsh behind bars, the case of Anna Walsh leaves haunting questions. What exactly happened inside that Cohasset home on New Year's Eve? Did Anna sense the danger in her final hours? Prosecutors laid out the searches, the evidence, the timeline, but the exact moment of violence has never been seen, never been fully explained. Was this crime the result of sudden rage, or had it been planned long before? Brian's federal fraud case meant he faced the possibility of years in prison. Anna's growing career suggested she may have been preparing for a life without him. Was the crime born from fear of abandonment, or from something darker still? And then there are the children. 3 boys, too young to understand the forces that shattered their family. Their lives now forever marked by a story they didn't choose. Anna's life was one of ambition, resilience, and love. She survived upheaval in her homeland, built a future in America, and worked tirelessly for her family. Yet in the end, she fell victim not to strangers or circumstance, but to the very person she trusted most. As the years pass, one question will always remain: how well do we really know the people we share our lives with, and how many warnings do we ignore before it is too late?